The eye is never satisfied, and the ear is never filled from hearing. That's a paraphrase of Ecclesiastes 1:8, and it brings to mind an overall emotion or, I don't know, tone, reality that I think a few men wrestle with in Spider-Man Life Story issue number 2. And I've pulled a quote from it. I think, I honestly can't even remember if it's, by the way, this is going to be full spoilers for the last issue, Spider-Man Life Story 1, and then, random stuff throughout Spider-Man's history, because that's how these comics work. It's encapsulating Spidey's entire life, Peter Parker's entire life, and exploring a story that incorporates those decades in just a few issues. So anyway, I don't know if it's Harry as the Black Goblin who says this, or if it's Professor Warren, whose name I don't remember the first name, but the guy's the Jackal, right? Pretty much, from the Clone Saga. And it could be Peter at the end. But the quote I pulled for the title of this episode is, "I have nothing." And it's an interesting sentiment. To quote from a song, the poor man has it all, but is not content with anything, while the rich man's hands are empty, but he's sitting like a king. There is, it's definitely religious. I don't know if it's just confined to the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic religions, this idea that like a true wealthy person is somebody who is content with their lot and who is happy with what they have, and that material wealth is immaterial in reality, because we live in an existence where spirit matters more than flesh. But I think that is a theme that's explored in this issue. Like I said, I'm MJ. I love Spider-Man. I love Marvel Comics generally, and I'm reading through some of these issues, talking about them, giving my thoughts on the art, the storytelling, everything, basically doing a review and then commenting, using the comic as a jumping off point to discuss various issues, whether they be social, political, philosophical, or just how cool stuff is. This is Swinging Through Comics, and I invite you to join me. So I'm going to get off my high horse and my soapbox. Maybe it should be MJ's soapbox. Anyway, and talk about this cover first. So we've got, let's see, Mark Bagley's doing pencils again. Zdarsky's writing. I don't know if Hennessy's doing the inking and Daramonta. I don't know. Maybe the editor. Who knows? I should have looked at that more carefully. But I think this is a really cool cover. Again, this putting Spider-Man in the middle of these two things, and being held on to by his webs. It's an interesting, very evocative. I mean, it's kind of the same as last time, and Zdarsky did the last cover and this cover, but it's cool because it feels like he's trying to stop this ball from dropping, like literally trying to stop this bomb from going off, and destroying people's lives. And I guess that's pretty true. So it's evocative of that truth going on in the story, and it's a neat cover. I'm sure the covers on this are harder. I'm going to give the covers on this a pass more than other comics, because it really irritates me when comics show things on the cover that have nothing to do with what's going on inside. But this, covers over a year of Peter's life. I think it's over a year, or certainly like 8 or 9 months. And it's kind of crazy to me. How are you supposed to encapsulate all that in such a small amount of time, especially without giving away the big spoilers? Or the huge surprises and twists that are contained in the issue. And I'm going to try to keep from spoiling everything in this issue. Maybe I'll spoil the previous issues, but not really the current one that I'm discussing and reviewing. As best as I can. I'll try to keep it tight. But anyway, so I like the cover a lot. I think it's very evocative and symbolic of everything that's going on in the issue. So the Black Goblin design, and I don't want to sound like I'm well, I said before that I will be critical of the comics when they warrant it, but this Black Goblin design is so freaking cool. I like that it's not just Green Goblin #2. First of all, I like that idea. I like that it's the Black Goblin, that he's got these weird gold highlights on him, that like triangle thing for his, it's not a pauldron, it's like a shoulder piece covering like a breast armor kind of thing, or I don't even know what it is, but I like how different it is. He's got these claws, he's missing gloves. It looks like he has talons more. Like, there's key little features that are different about him that make sense that it would be an evolution of the technology and of the overall, aesthetic of the Goblin. And we find out, Harry is the Black Goblin, and we find out why he's the Black Goblin. Ay, Dios mío, these trucks. Anyway, I like walking and being outside because, I'd like to be a little fitter, but it's irritating that there's all this, massive vehicle noise as I'm doing these. But anyway, I'm a guerrilla video maker. That's what it's going to be. Video content maker, I guess I should say. Anyway, getting back to the art. I want to know what the lead time was on this. Mark Bagley is a longtime Spider-Man artist. I don't know how long he's been doing it. This particular image, so I call the channel Swinging Through Comics. You can see my little Spider-Man swinger guy. I had a guy, Nate Niles, I believe. I'll put his credit in the in this episode at least. An artist I found on Twitter. I had him do the art for me for the show, and he also penciled the Swinging Through Comics thing, which is cool. Anyway, I looked at his art. He took I don't know how many hours he put into it, but it's interesting because he's an amateur artist. He's developing his skills, and I've seen some of his art, and it's really fantastic. And the technique of the hatching and everything that he did on the Spider-Man avatar I have for the channel, it's interesting to look closely at that because I went in and I did transparencies and I removed colors and I manipulated the image to get it to be 100% what I wanted it to be for the show. And then I also thought it would be fun to grab this Mark Bagley image of Spider-Man swinging through New York and try to use a background erasing tool to look to isolate Spider-Man himself. And I noticed he has the white border around him, and I thought, oh, he's going to pop out from the background, and it's going to be so easy. But the artwork, the detail of the artwork is really interesting when you get zoomed in close to it, like I did with my digital copy of it. There are all these little details, the buildings around him. Some of them, the bigger ones are, more sketched out, or I guess more accurately rendered. More time was taken on them. And then the smaller buildings in the background that are kind of being eclipsed by his body, especially like his lower half, they're just like gestures of buildings. And then the inker came in, or colorist came in and colored them in with just kind of like blurry lines or like a swatch of color or whatever that made it feel like a building, especially with all the other art there. And looking at it that closely really gave me an appreciation for it. So these pencils are dead on, and I feel an appreciation for the inking and coloring too, which it just seems so hard to get a sense for what is good about those things. And it's easy when something is off to say, that doesn't look right, but when something's right, it feels like it's supposed to be right. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly why it is right. And again, as a layman, as someone who's just kind of getting into comics as an adult again, and really trying to examine the craft behind them, I'm trying to appreciate all the hard work that goes into them, and good hard work was done here, and I like it. Something unique to comics is how they frame things, and Reed Richards' head in this image in the center, where it's popped out, it's just his head. It's a floating head with some color in the back of it to suggest the environment that they're in, but it really brings focus to his eyes, his face, his expression, which is really nicely detailed to show. I think he's disgusted with Peter right now, or he's very irritated with Peter, and it's cool doing this weird floating head technique boxed in between these other panels where he's more fully rendered and detailed. It really works to be expressive and show the emotion, and that's really important. And it's just it's one of the great things that comics can do. If you saw that in a movie where they digitally removed people's heads or bodies and just left their head floating, it would look silly and unwieldy. But in here, it really works, and it sells the feelings, and I love the effect of it. Contrasting that, the scene where Black Goblin, Spider-Man, Warren, and Gwen are all outside of the lab when it blows up, it goes the opposite way. It leans into more of a realistic look, rendering things actually as they would be. There's a cloud of smoke behind them kind of obscuring what the background would be, but it's effective because if there was a big explosion there would be a cloud of smoke hiding things, but there's shrapnel and debris, and it all looks really good. Spidey's hand breaks one of the panels as he's crying out because of what has happened in the explosion. This is a really great look of Harry pulling the mask off of his face, and it's just creepy. It's very effective, and it kind of sells, I don't know, the horror, the weirdness of that second skin goblin mask, and again, it's something I liked. Because these life story issues are sampling all of the Spider-Man's history and mixing in different things, the shock of the Goblin, or not the Goblin, but of Dr. Octopus, Otto Octavius, having been reformed, having married May Parker, working with Reed Richards at the Fantastic Four at the Baxter Building with Peter. That just blew my mind. And I think I'd said this in a previous review. I want them to do life story stuff for all the different characters, or major ones who they think they could do a really good job with, and mix in interesting elements like that, like even learning about, what happened with Invisible Girl. It was just a great shock, and it was even more impressive than, well, it was probably one of the biggest shocks of the issue, and it was really cool. And it's not a detail that matters very much, but it's just interesting how you can use these characters and change the details of their lives in order to focus in on your main character. And I feel like Reed is, in later issues, going to be even more of a foil for Peter and what he's doing as Spider-Man, etc., etc. But I'll stop talking about that right now and talk about more of Peter's character and how it's developed a little bit differently than you would have expected. And a big surprise for me, coming from the cartoons, from the Raimi movies and stuff, was that Mary Jane isn't Peter's first love, despite the fact that in the comics and stuff they get married. It was Gwen Stacy first, and there was her tragic death and things like that on the bridge, and we know those sorts of things, that they're in the general Spider-Man lore. But seeing what happened and how Gwen was out of the picture, and how Peter and Mary Jane ended up involved romantically, seeing the setup of it in this issue was really interesting to me, and it was really effective. And kind of getting back to that theme of I have nothing, and I don't remember who says that. I think it's Peter. I really do. It's interesting how Warren, Norman, Harry, Peter, they all want these things. Even Octavius, you could say, is driven by a type of greed. And it's interesting how to explore how, and going back to Richards being a foil, even his greed to an extent is like a foil for what's going on in Peter's life. And that contrast of these people with these fantastical abilities, they're these gods with these feet of clay, which is like the old Marvel thing. They want these superheroes to be, superhuman. They want them to be as human as you and me and have all the same issues we have. It's really interesting to see in this story this, greed and this, like almost ambition becoming like a, what do they call that? A millstone around the neck. There's another word for them that's escaping me at the moment. But it's really interesting to see how, these men ostensibly are trying to do good things for the most part. And in pursuing these things in such a way, they're kind of ruining their own lives, or the repercussions of them are pretty serious. And I don't know, I like that. And this version of Peter is like, he's no longer really plagued by Uncle Ben's death. I don't think in the same way where he has all this guilt, but he seeks to, I don't know, it's really interesting the way his life goes. I love the drama of it, and it's almost like a warning for readers and fans. And there's been some things lately, like there's been stuff going on in my personal life, and I've read up to issue 5, and I've thought like, oh, am I being like Peter? Am I becoming this person who is not putting his work in at home the way he should be, because I'm trying to do this other thing and seek these ambitions? And I don't know, I like the idea of these comics and this story of this Peter and Spider-Man being like a big red flag, a big warning to the reader, to the audience, to say like, hey, make sure you have your priorities straight. It's good to do certain things, and it's good to be noble, and it's good to take responsibility and to do good with your life, but kind of don't do that at the expense of everything else. And Warren was pursuing a goal, and he ended up having that totally destroyed because he was working with Norman in order to do it. Norman wants this legacy for himself, and he ends up destroying that because Harry runs away at the end and he refuses to play ball. And you kind of have this theme repeating again, where these guys are going for something, and they're going for it so hard that they forget to think about how people in their lives will be impacted and how truly they will be impacted when maybe those people leave or aren't available for them anymore, due specifically to the way they sought their goals. And I think I'm kind of rambling, so I'm going to stop here. Again, this is another great issue. You got to get it, and come back for another Spider-Man life story review over here on Swing Through Comics. This is MJ signing off. MJMunoz.com is home for all my work, podcasts and reviews of anime, tokusatsu, Star Wars, and more, plus my original writings. If you didn't enjoy this, critique me. If you did, leave me a comment. If you really like this, consider tipping me at coffee.com/MJMunoz. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Until next time, be well.